Hey, what's going on everyone? Clocked it here, and man, Metroid Prime 4 is nearly here. The latest breakdown of the game has just got me so excited. I honestly can't wait. But, I in this video, I just want to talk about Samus Aran herself, and just the series, and why the series, doesn't get more traction in these gaming streets. When the IP itself, I'd say around 90% of its games have been incredible, to great, and of course industry changing. The impact Metroid has had on gaming can be felt in a number of genres and well-known IPs. Even if some of those impacts aren't as clear as some might realize, there have been ideas of getting Metroid out there into more forms of media, whether that's books, comics, graphic novels, and of course movies and TV series. All these things help bring more eyes onto existing IPs, as we know. But also in my experience, at least with TV shows and movies, these experiences can be quite far removed from what the video game itself actually offers. And it's another reminder of how different video games can be from other forms of media. Quick examples, like the Last of Us TV show compared to the game, think something like that can have an easier transition because the game itself was already designed to be like a TV show, like a movie in its visual presentation and execution of gameplay, I would say. While something like the Fallout TV series compared to the game, it's like, could you imagine, your average non-gamer coming from the TV series into those jank-ass Bethesda games? The experience, I'm sure, would be utterly jarring. And I'd say the same could apply to Metroid if some went from a possible TV show or movie straight into the games in their current forms. If people went from the TV shows into games in their current forms, whether that's Prime's first-person perspective or Metroid's general 2D perspective. Metroid's gameplay is still very unique, but out of everything that it does with its gameplay, out of everything that it does with its music, graphics, and lore, our protagonist, our favorite bounty hunter and destroyer of worlds, we still see, for 99% of the games and time we play as her, we still see Samus Aran looking like this. Samus in her utterly glorious power suit. This peak, video game character design. I love it. Now let's get something straight here. First and foremost, there is nothing wrong with seeing Samus primarily in her glorious power suit. Having a character in a suit with their face covered has never affected an audience's response to them, I feel, which I suppose is obvious for us Metroid fans who love seeing Samus in her suit. That's our badass bounty hunter, right? When she's got that on, we know she means business. If I place her now, just look at her. Look at this character design in Metroid Dread. Just look at it.
Look at it!
And of course, we see other iconic characters in suits, both games and other media before, with the likes of Darth Vader, Master Chief, Judge Dredd, Doom Guy, Iron Man, etc. People love badass looking characters. It's as simple as that, and Samus Aran is indeed a badass looking character. But I feel like she has one major problem, actually two major, make that three major problems. I feel that it could be these which might be the sole reasons as to why Samus and Metroid as an IP isn't getting the traction as both a character and a series as I feel they should, especially in sales. If we are quickly speaking on sales, Metroid Dread shifted over 3 million copies, which is never to be sniffed at, at number wise. But given the success of the Switch and a number of Nintendo series, new and old, which have seen staggering sales in the tens of millions on the Switch. I'm sorry, but Metroid should be up there with them this generation for all the same reasons. I made a post a while back on the old and I suppose abandoned for me Bird app. I'm now primarily on Blue Sky, by the way. But I posted a while back that I personally consider Metroid to be that third piece of the Nintendo Triforce. I've done a whole video on it too. And although other series sell a ton more, when it comes to that peak fiction, that peak Nintendo AAA-like experience for me, then Mario, Zelda, and Metroid will always be my Nintendo Triforce, I feel, which is probably the case for many old-school Nintendo fans like myself. So I would love to see Metroid where Zelda and Mario are sales-wise, as well as greater worldwide recognition. So, as the title of this video says, I believe that in order for the world to see Metroid as a franchise at the same time, as the same exposure as Mario and Zelda, we need to see and hear Samus Aran in her human visage a lot more, and I mean way more. I've always said that I consider Samus to be Nintendo's deepest character. That one character in their pantheon of IPs that could take a story to the next level. That could take a gaming universe to the next level. And when I mean next level, there are a few other characters and game series I think could do this for Nintendo. Maybe like Princess Zelda herself, and also possibly Star Fox. But in terms of depth of character and story, I personally think Samus sits at number one. So in order to see Samus, how can the games achieve this, which could then lead on to greater recognition and desire to see more? Outside of the Metroid fanbase, which I also said in the past, based on sales numbers of Metroid Dread, the highest selling Metroid game ever, in the highest selling Nintendo era ever, and hopefully Nintendo's biggest selling console ever, or the biggest selling console ever, fingers crossed. That core Metroid fan base is most likely only about 1 million strong, maybe 1.5 million, with the other 1.5 million being new Switch era Nintendo fans and a few others willing to give this fabled Nintendo series a try. Now I can hear some of my fellow Metroid fans saying, talk. No, I love my quiet, brooding Samus, and I certainly don't want to return to the horrors of the Samus portrayed in Metroid Other M.
Wait! Adam! Wait! Adam! Please wait!
Yes, I agree. That portrayal of Samus did her no favors whatsoever in that game. Never mind most of the other supporting voice characters. Her character needed to be treated with dignity and respect, and not thrown into some over-dramatized shonen-like plot pieces. Which I feel Metroid Other M done just wrong. But do you know what we all loved? And I mean got raging goosebumps over, raging goosebumps, whilst also saying
perfection.
This part in Metroid Dread, momentary spoilers for Dread people. So if you haven't experienced it, turn that volume off for 5 seconds starting now.
Kino ulo turuta, ana maril sanur pura, ay marhel kalom.
That moment in the game was arguably the best moment in Metroid history to us Metroid fans. A literally jaw on the floor moment, along with, and also I've been waiting my whole Metroid life for this. Thank Crom.
Crom.
Out of all the Nintendo characters, Samus Aran is the one who needs to be fully voice acted, in my opinion. The character utterly deserves that extra dimension to truly convey her struggles, thoughts, rage, and moments of contentment. And, Metroid Dread, in a small spattering of moments, utterly nailed this. But even from a casual audience point of view, voicing Samus, Nintendo's most powerful and ass-kicking female in my opinion, would bridge that gap between them, just knowing in their minds that inside that glorious looking power suit is not just a powerful woman who you only see in her death screams or revealed once at the end of the game, but is also a vocally confident, strong, but also troubled and rich character who they can further connect with on an emotional level. I've never had issues with silent characters, don't get me wrong, or text-spoken characters. In fact, I love them. But voice acting has its place as well, and Samus, I feel, needs that more than ever. People love characters like Darth Vader, Master Chief, and Judge Dredd, like I mentioned, not just for their visual appearance, but also for their unique vocal dialogue as characters when they are portrayed in movies.
Judgment time.
And it's easy for many to forget the intro to Metroid Prime 3 with Samus just chilling in her gunship without her power suit activated. It told us that when she's not actively on a mission, she's not living in that suit 24 hours a day, which we knew anyway, but it's always nice to see. But what we also had with Metroid Prime 3 was voice acting. The Federation troopers, commanders, AI computers, and even the bounty hunters all had spoken dialogue apart from Samus Aran. So, what if Samus spoke in this scene I'll show you now? Directly, strongly, sometimes coldly, depending on the required response.
The flagship's Aurora unit.
Ah, an organic supercomputer. Fascinating. It's my understanding that the Galactic Federation's core network is comprised of such units. What is the logic in disrupting a Federation training mission?
They're pirates. How could they resist a prize like that?
That never would have happened if I'd been there.
Then it's a shame you weren't. The pirates boarded the Valhalla and gained access to the ship's Aurora unit, 313.
I personally think it would have added a wealth more to many of these scenes, especially the ones where the other bounty hunters meet their ends in part, both to Samus and Dark Samus. But also more excitingly for myself in my mind, like in Metroid Fusion, when Samus is talking in text about Adam as she descends in the elevators to new areas. As examples, what if Samus gave us some inner voiced thoughts during some cutscenes, or even when she's going to new areas in her ship, to flesh out both the story and her character, how she's truly feeling at the time, knowing that Dark Samus is also herself in part, and how its anger could be a reflection of her own hidden demons. Seeing Samus, Samus's human face whilst this is happening, really seeing her facial expressions, I feel would elevate her character and our connection to her much greater than through her visor. People need to know who she is outside of the suit. Samus was known as gaming's first great female protagonist for many. A secret first revealed at the end of the original game, but even to this day in her games, she is hidden for the most part. Even when in, how about even when in safer places and she's perhaps talking to a Federation trooper or something? Her helmet could disappear and you see her interacting, looking stern, getting angry, maybe sometimes a little bit of sarcasm to help grow her character, or showing fear and sadness. But then when she means business, that helmet comes on and someone or something or some world is about to be exterminated. We need to see more of Samus in her human form, in my opinion. It's as simple as that. And lastly for me, from what we're seeing, both Metroid Prime's first person view and Metroid's classic side-scrolling views, they don't seem to be getting people into the series as much as they should. Maybe this could be the way Metroid Prime plays, or the consistent, yet arguably still niche genre that Metroid created. Even with greater sales successes like Silksong, perhaps another angle is needed. And for me, I truly believe a full third-person Metroid title could provide the hunter with the attention she deserves as a character, and provide another third perspective for Metroid as a series. A strong third-person shooter with solid platforming, intense combat, strong dialogue and voice acting, and exciting set pieces could provide a whole new world for Samus. I'm a massive fan of Jet Force Gemini on the N64, and in some ways that game was Metroid-like in experience, at least in terms of giving an idea of what a third-person Metroid game could have been like on the N64. And playing in third person instantly provides Samus core skills with immediate action, visible action, like morphing into a morph ball, wall jumping, screw attacks, melee attacks, locking onto targets, tackling puzzles and platforming, etc. We've seen it done throughout the series, through Metroid Prime and even Metroid Other M, which was in many ways third person, but it still had fixed camera angles for the bulk of the game. Something that would be removed in a full 3D third person game. And once again, this lends to seeing Samus more in her suit from all angles, but also opportunity for her in her Zero suit. And for myself, I found that third-person games lend themselves more to a wider crowd than 2D or first-person games. Do you think characters like Lara Croft from Tomb Raider, Aloy from Horizon, or even Jill Valentine from Resident Evil would have become as well known as they have if they were in first-person, or most of the time, or even mostly played from a side-scrolling perspective? I don't think so. Samus needs to be seen and heard as much as these characters. But, these are my thoughts. With Metroid Prime 4 just around the corner, and with the footage we've already seen, I don't think we'll be seeing or hearing much of what I've asked for here. Outside of the general, what Prime has generally been like. So my worries about Metroid Prime 4 bringing in new crowds and sales, remain the same. But at least what we have seen so far are some of the best and realistic character designs Nintendo has ever made. With some of these Federation troops, looking insane for the Nintendo title, in my opinion. But this is what Retro Studios can bring as a Western studio owned by Nintendo. I personally cannot wait for this game. I've waited, so long for that. I've done, my own Metroid videos on this channel. Maybe not as much as I should have, and it has every potential of being the best Metroid Prime game. I even said the fact that this is a Switch game, we're going to see this jump, and I think we're already seeing it. And it could end up even being, for far as we know, the best Metroid game. I mean, Metroid Dread is now my favorite side-scrolling Metroid game. Samus Aran is one of my favorite characters ever. And I personally just want the world to see her and know her more. And both hearing and seeing more of her as Samus, I believe, is the key to her greater success. So, like I said, these are my thoughts. Please let me know your own. And as always, I'll reply to every single one of you. Take care all, and peace.